What is the first Let's Wrong post we got?
We've got the joy in discovery.
Ooh, hell yeah. He talks about the amazing feeling of discovering something for the very first time. And like, honestly, just discovering something at all is a great feeling. But being the absolute first person in the species to discover something, that is amazing.
Yeah, I always have related to this in the former fashion there of like discovering it myself rather than being the first on the planet or
Yeah,
whatever.
most people. Yeah.
I mean, I've independently discovered like concepts that I later learned existed already.
Yeah. Which is
but
also really fucking cool.
totally. And like the thing is like I'm the one who finds the sources and solutions to all the problems in my life, or like, I don't know if I've mentioned the white whale that is my bathroom vent at this house. But we don't need the long version. The short version is that it's been a problem since I moved here a year and a half ago, and I'm still working to get it like perfectly resolved. But finding out like everything along the way that's wrong with it is like, oh, neat! I just figured this out, and that's fun.
Yeah.
Sure, I didn't like invent physics or whatever.
Right.
But figuring things out it's fun in a way that having somebody show you the answer isn't. And I've got a perfect way to illustrate this. Have you ever played Wordle? Most people have.
I've played games like Wordle. I've never played Wordle itself.
Close enough.
Mm-hmm.
Wordle changes its word of the day every day. And I remember some months ago, the Very Bad Wizards had they opened their segment with ramblings, kind of like us, because we do it throughout the episode. And they were talking about whether or not either of them had ever Googled the answer to a Wordle so that they didn't fail that day. And I think they both had at least once, and I have at least once, back when it was keeping track of streaks. And it doesn't keep track of streaks anymore without an account, and I refuse to make one. So now it's no pressure. And I think I did the one time because it was like, oh, that sucked all the fun out of it.
Yeah.
Like, it's not that high of a high to get the answer, but it is not high at all to have it given to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I have two things about that. One is then I want to rewind back in time just a little bit to say that I completely agree with you on the fixing things around the house, and just in general, fixing things, maintenance, that kind of thing. They're always neat new challenges because it's always something different, and each little thing that goes wrong in a different way. And so it's a challenge that is constantly new, but you keep learning something each time, and then you've actually made your life better. So it's a great thing to pick up if you have the spare time to do it, which I assume most people do. Like, unless you're working 70 hours a week, you usually have some time to tinker around and try to fix stuff around the house. Just play a few less video games that day.
Well, and like it depends on how pressing the issue is too. Like, there are days where I invent problems for myself because I'm bored,
right?
And then there are things that like, oh yeah, the door doesn't close all the way and it goes outside. Like, this is a problem.
Yeah.
So
like when you don't have hot water, you can't take the time to figure that out on your own.
or at the very least, you can't put it off and play more video games, right?
Yes. Yeah. The other thing I want to do is just really agree with you on the video game thing. I think this was very much the downfall of World of Warcraft, that when the game first came out, like you had to figure out most things by yourself, and the things that you didn't figure out by yourself, you got by like talking with other people. So at least there was a social aspect to it. And in the original game, like you go back and you play those first raid boss fights nowadays, and they're so simple and even boring. But that's because, like, you know what to do. Like, part of the game originally was just figuring out, wow, I just died. What just happened? What ability does this boss have? How does it interact with other abilities? Like, just even figuring out on basic level what the hell is going on was part of the game. And at first, like, that was considered trade secrets among guilds. The guilds who were first downing bosses and progressing on bosses were figuring this out, and they kept it all very secret amongst themselves, and it would slowly sometimes leak out. And so, like, lesser scrub guilds like my own could pick up tips on, like, oh, this is what a boss does, this is how to counter it, so we didn't get ass stomped. But nowadays, like, literally everything is out even before the game's released. It's out in beta, and everybody knows exactly how to do everything. So it's a completely different game now. Now it's about like executing. It's about figuring out how to do the thing. Like, you already know what you need to do. It's just executing on it that's difficult. It's a technical challenge as opposed to a discovery challenge. And
trying to like finesse, find strats or whatever,
Yeah, and that it's a different game, which is fine. This is also a good game, but it's not the game you had originally, and I don't think you can ever have that game anymore. because the internet is such a big thing now. From what I hear, the closest you get to that is Elden Ring, where the only way to get the story is to literally coordinate with, dozens, hundreds of other people who are playing through the game and collating all the various bits of stuff that you find and collecting it online and being like, oh my God, this is what's happening.
Well, and finding all the hidden walls and stuff. Like, no one person has the time to do that.
Yes, exactly.
The world is so expansive. And so, yeah, some games are meant to be played as a community like that. But yeah, I remember I really sucked a lot of the fun out of my first play of Skyrim by Googling, like, what would happen if I did this with the Dark Brotherhood quest line or whatever.
Yeah.
Rather than just, like, go through it and do what I feel like and see what happens. Yeah. And so I've made an effort ever since to play every game like that. And, man, I had a great time, especially with like Tears of the Kingdom. There was a whole giant thing that I had no idea about, and I just monkeyed around and found it like way early. And if I had watched a 10-minute playthrough video of somebody like, oh, here I'm starting the game, and here's the things you need to know, they would have showed me that. So going in, the thing is, and actually this post ends with something that could as well be at the top. It's a quote by someone called Ran Priere, looks French. Quote, a friend once told me that I look at the world as if I've never seen it before. I thought, that's a nice compliment. Wait, I never have seen it before. Did everyone else get a preview? So when you get the opportunity, skip the preview.
Yeah.
Go in and discover it yourself. Like sometimes you need guardrails. Like if your car is making a weird noise, Google it and then try and figure out the problem. Don't just like open your hood for the first time and start hitting things with a wrench. But
right.
Use your discretion. You get it.
Yeah.
Y'all are smart.
Yes. Well, I guess back to the post. Elias just, I guess, goes into his thoughts on why it is that the discovery seems much more interesting when you discover it yourself rather than having it given to you. He says one of the things probably is that you don't struggle with a single problem for months or years if it's something you can just look up in the library, which is why it feels more good to discover something that is not unknown before, because there's literally no way to find it, right?
Or that is not known before. Yeah.
Sorry.
I have to imagine he's right. And I suspect Yudkowsky's made original discoveries, at least in niche areas. Regarding, I guess it's hard to say. Like inventing calculus is something that you can point at and be like, "Look, I'm correct."
Well, I mean, I think
fine tuning an area of AI alignment or something is less solid than calculus.
I do want to go back to the video game thing because it does feel to me like it's slightly less rewarding to do something that if there is an answer that you could just Google. Like it's still more rewarding than Googling it. That sucks all the fun out of it. And what's even the point? But being like the first person in a game, which is probably why the alpha closed releases are so popular, like being the very first person in and figuring it out when there's literally nowhere to look just feels better than figuring it out when okay, I'm doing this because it's fun, but I could look it up if I really wanted to.
There might be something to that. I have it was since I've eliminated that temptation or like squash it whenever it rears its head. I don't think that subtracts into the fun for me. Like knowing that there is an answer, or at least I can Google the question or whatever. I don't think that sucks any of the fun out. But maybe it's because I've never had the experience of playing a polished alpha before. So who knows? But
he does go on to agree with you later on the post where he says, you know what? Everyone knows the answer to everything somewhere in the multiverse. That doesn't mean it's any less cool. And
exactly.
I just disagree with him on that matter. But I think that's purely a matter of taste.
And it might be a cope too.
It could be. But I think that, I for me, it just actually does feel less cool. So there's that. And there's no good reason for it. There's no logical or rational reason. It's just that's how it feels.
Yeah, I guess maybe then the thing is to like try and adjust your feelings a little bit. But that's way easier said than done, I think, every time.
Yeah.
I do like that he considers the less charitable interpretations of why there's like a super high from being the first one to figure stuff out.
Yeah. I think
because I always like considering those views, and then sometimes I think there's something to them, and sometimes there's not.
What's the next one that he gives? The less charitable one.
Well, so the first one he gives is that there's like the commitment and consistency and cognitive dissonance of, well, I've worked on this project for 10 years, therefore the answer must be really valuable. Now I feel really good for having solved it.
Yeah.
Um,
I don't.
I think. Oh, go ahead.
Well, no. You were in the middle.
Uh, I was going to say, like, I think that there's probably something to that, maybe a bit, but like, since I've experienced the joy of figuring stuff out, without burning a lot of time into it, I guess, like, I do feel like it's intrinsically rewarding in itself.
Yeah.
So there might be something about the fact of like, I guess, I don't know, maybe I never really experienced a lot of happiness when I notice I've had cognitive dissonance. Usually it's some other emotion that I'm tricking myself into.
Mm.
But
I,
yeah, go ahead.
I agree with him that things that you do work harder at are more feel more valuable. I think this is part of the large part of the reason for liking Burning Man and similar things. Like, part of it is just proving to yourself that you can do it, but another part of it is like, this was hard, and just the fact that it was really hard makes it intrinsically feel more important, more valuable. And he says this is like a slightly less charitable reading, but I don't find anything uncharitable about that. I think that it's entirely right and proper to value things that took more work more, because that means they're much harder to reproduce. They're harder to replicate. Like, you should value something that it costs 10,000 hours of labor to replace more than something that it costs 1 hour of labor to replace, right?
Yeah, I think that he's saying that that's where the high comes from, like in its entirety, rather than a large part of it.
Okay.
But yeah, I do think that. I mean, I've had problems with whatever stuff at my job where it's like I'm sitting there banging my head on this thing, and then it turns out like, oh, it was a typo, and I spent like 30 minutes or an hour or whatever, and it's like, so that is not a fun solution,
Right.
even though I found it. So
Right.
like there's nothing there that if like the answer isn't any fun, I don't get any high from it, even though it took me a while to figure it out.
Yes.
But
I do think that this, it seems to, like, he's saying that this is sort of like a bad cheat and we shouldn't use it. And I disagree, because I think like a clothes that you knitted yourself, or a bookshelf that you carved out of wood with your own hands, despite the fact that you didn't have to do all that labor. You could easily get a factory to pump that out for, 2 hours worth of labor on your end, the equivalent in money, or less. And the stuff you made by hand is probably going to be worse, especially the early ones are going to be worse. So you're doing a lot more labor for something that's much crappier. And yet, I always like those things more. They're more valuable to me. I have some history to them, and I think this is fine. Actually, I don't think that it's cheating to intentionally make things harder and take more labor so that you will like them more, because that's how humans work, right? It feels dumb to rail against the biology that we're imbued with because it's not perfectly rational or something.
I totally hear where you're coming from. But some part of my brain is grinding on that, and I'm trying to figure out exactly what it is. I think it's that this isn't the polished thought, but I can't find the right way to put it. Doing something the hard way for its own sake, to try and like get the payoff from it. I don't know. It seems like sometimes a suboptimal use of your time, maybe. But that's not exactly really my objection. Like,
but if you get something that you like more, it's not suboptimal then.
No, for sure. I'm trying to figure out. I mean, like, there's a reason that you don't spend all of your time making furniture.
Well,
right.
I have limited amount of time.
I mean, so that's part of it. So I guess when it comes down to allocating your time, you want to spend it as, usually in like some measure of a valuable way.
Yeah, I got to pick and choose what I can do and what I can't.
And so, like, as long as you're doing that, then reinventing the wheel every time doesn't sound like the best happiness factory, right?
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I can't quite find my objection there. So I'll tacitly agree with what you said.
Okay.
I do like the really uncharitable reading is that the joy of first discovery is about status, competition, scarcity, beating everyone else to the punch. It doesn't matter whether you have a 3-room house or a 4-room house. What matters is having a bigger house than the Joneses. I suspect that's more plausible and probably true in some cases. Being the first one to figure something out and being able to rub someone else's face in it is probably, a lot of fun for somebody.
Why do you have to add rubbing someone else's face in it to that, though?
Because if you're the first one to figure it out, like if your house is bigger than the Joneses, but they don't know it, there's no point in your house being bigger, right?
The
whole point is that you have it better than they do, and they know it.
But you aren't doing it to make them feel bad. You're doing it to see. Because my comment on this, like, why is this uncharitable? I think that it's actually good to have status from doing things that are hard or making great discoveries or cool things in life.
It should give you status. I think what he's trying to get at, though, is like the focus of this is the joy in discovery. And what makes it joyful? Is it the fact that you did it first and like you get to be like, aha, I beat you to it? Or is it the fact that like it's intrinsically fun to figure something out?
Okay, it's intrinsically
I think he's arguing more for the latter.
It's intrinsically fun to do something first, though.
I think it is.
Like the reason I don't like the word that he used uncharitable is because it feels like a personality judgment. Like, or when saying that you're rubbing someone's face in it, you're saying they're a bad person for liking getting status for doing something first. And I don't think that makes you a bad person at all. I think that's great, and that should be both fine, and it is kind of admirable to recognize that someone is the kind of person that can and does go and do something first.
Let's say you got to play like the alpha release of the new World of Warcraft or something, and I've never played World of Warcraft, and I know it doesn't quite work this way, but just bear with me for the tortured analogy. You get through the first big dungeon, and you find this cool secret at the end, right? That would feel awesome, especially you're the first one to do it. If you knew that your friend or somebody else found something there first, or like whatever, then you go online to post about it, and then you see someone else posted it. Like, I get that it would take some of the oomph out of your having discovered it, but it shouldn't suck all the fun out. Yeah, no,
it shouldn't suck all the fun out, but it's a part of it.
It's part of it. I don't know. I think, and I do think there's something to this. Like, I like watching Jeopardy and Wheel of Fortune, and I especially like doing it in a group, or at least with more than one, with more than just me in the room, because when I know an answer, I shout it. Right?
Awesome.
And
but what if you got the status of shouting it before someone else did, Stephen?
Well, that's the thing, is I actually enjoy that. So I do think there's something to this.
Yeah.
I felt really good last night. I was watching It's Jeopardy Masters, and it's Victoria Grosh and James Holzhauer, like the two titans of Jeopardy and trivia. And I knew an answer they both didn't.
Nice.
It was the only one.
Yeah.
But I forget which one it was. But I might even go back and skim the episode so I can find that question again, because I'm like, I knew an answer that both of those people didn't know.
That's awesome.
Yeah, it felt great.
Was it a question about like AI or rationality or something?
I wish. It might have been, there was a category called star words or something, and it was the answers are things like pulsars and neutron star or something. It might have been in that category, it might have been somewhere else, but yeah, they were both and there was a third contestant, but they were just trailing along. But yeah, I knew something that the two of them didn't, so that felt awesome. And it wasn't just that I got to it first; it was that they didn't know. But like, if I was watching it on the TV at the gym and I didn't get to like yell it and be like, aha, I would still find that fun. But it is more fun kind of doing it in front of people.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, but that's not all the
good,
fun.
Actually. No, it's not all the fun. It's just
that's right. Yeah, and I maybe that would be the difference here that is worth all this belaboring, is that it's okay for these to be, for you to enjoy something more just because it took you longer.
Yeah.
And it's okay for you to enjoy something more just because you got there first. But that shouldn't be the only way to get fun.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's the only way to get this high, whatever this feeling is, the joy of discovery, right?
Mm-hmm.
So as long as those aren't your only sources of joy of discovery, then that's fine. But these are definitely ingredients, I think.
Yeah. one of the things he says about all this is that the euphoric jive of scientific discovery has to be about scarcity. Like, if it does, that means it's only available to one person per civilization for any given truth. And I mean, certainly the high of being the first person to discover that thing is scarce in that way. And I don't know what to say to him aside from like, yeah, that's reality, dude. I'm sorry. I guess it kind of sucks, but also it just feels weird to say that this is a bad thing about people that they would enjoy having that. It's not uncharitable in any regards. It's just, unfortunate.
I think his phrasing is that the really uncharitable
can do it.
reading is that the joy of discovery is about status. Because it might be partially about status, but it's not purely status.
I mean, if his
So
argument is that some people think that it's purely about status, see, that's such a dumb argument. I don't think that's what he's saying.
That's fair. You know what? We'll have to ask him at some point.
No.
But I don't know. Like, I do like figuring things out, but knowing that someone else has done it first doesn't strip a lot of the fun out for me, and I don't think it should.
Mm-hmm.
It's I don't know. Maybe if I ever make an original discovery, or invent something novel, then I'll be like, aha, this is actually awesome. I have no idea what I was talking about before. Previous me had no idea how high this euphoria could go.
Mm-hmm.
But as I am now, I think that being the second or the thousandth to the punch is totally fine. The point is the real joy is the fun you had along the way, and the discovery at the end of it, right?
Yeah.
I think that's totally fine. Then you can, on top of that, pile the joy of like, and I worked really hard at this for a decade, and I beat everyone else on Earth to the question or to the answer.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think that it should be intrinsically fun, and I don't think actually you and I are disagreeing. I think it's just him calling it uncharitable rather than saying this is a thing that could be stacked on top of it but shouldn't be the focus.
Right. Yeah. It's entirely an aesthetic argument.
I think you're right. Yeah.
Which I'm finding a lot more things are about aesthetics than I thought. And someone recently said everything is about aesthetics ultimately, which I'm not sure I agree there, but I think it's more true than I thought it was.
I don't know if there's a quick way to dive into that or not.
Well, our most recent Fallout episode where we talked.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. We talked for a while about crap. What was it now that we went on about?
It was about the how the writers wanted us to view the Vault Dwellers versus how the society, like in universe.
I was thinking specifically about calling something luck as opposed to work that other people did, and ultimately we don't disagree on anything of substance, but we disagree on the aesthetics. I really dislike the aesthetics of saying that, oh, you are just lucky, as opposed to you are the benefactor of other people's work. And that, it's just an aesthetic argument, and yet I was feeling quite impassioned by it.
I like that. I think it's fun to get impassioned, and I think maybe we don't actually disagree. But what was I going to say? Oh yeah, that reminds me. If you're only subscribed to this feed, there was once upon a time a podcast called The Methods of Rationality, where Eneasz did the Harry Potter Methods of Rationality audiobook, and then subsequent other books, and it's been a source of random stuff since then. So keep that feed alive, because Eneasz and I are doing an episode by episode kind of just dissection and discussion of the TV show about Fallout.
Yeah, it's a lot of fun.
And there's another fun project coming up that'll be either released all at once or released once a week for like 37 or 40 weeks.
Ooh,
so
very mysterious. I know what it is.
You do.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so keep your eyes open for that.
Okay.
But yeah, so let's look at it this way. Is Newton a selfish bastard for explaining the orbits of the planets and the tides?
That dick.
Should he have left some fun on the table for the rest of us?
He could have, couldn't he?
He doesn't even strike me as that happy of a guy. I don't know a lot about him, but he seems like more of like an angry misanthrope than a joyful, Sagan style scientist. Right?
I always heard he was kind of a dick, and now I am convinced.
I mean, the alternative though would be to figure this stuff out and then just keep it secret. But then you lose the fun of being publicly the first one to figure it out and being able to to laud that as a source of victory, right? Which has its own intrinsic value, or which also has value, right?
Yeah, and it has
So
value
we don't want to
to
tell them not to have fun, but
and it has value to the rest of society to know this.
yeah.
Like,
So
that's a pretty big deal.
might be a drag that he got to do it all himself, but it's nice that he told everybody.
One thing I want to pull out, which he said just a little bit earlier, which I think we skipped over an accident. Eliezer says, I strongly suspect that a major part of science's PR problem in the population at large is people who instinctively believe that if knowledge is given away for free, it cannot be important. If you had to undergo a fearsome initiation ritual to be told the truth about evolution, maybe people would be more satisfied with the answer. I don't know what to do with that because, again, the fact that society does know these things is incredibly beneficial for society. And yet, boy, does he have a point. And that would just be a much more fun world to live in.
It would be. And I think it would do something to fight the feeling that, the facts of nature are in the Dole catalog of whatever common things, right?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, I can go look up how this works and on the internet, so it can't be that interesting.
But do you want to know what a rainbow really is? Well, first you have to be initiated into this cult of knowledge after having served like 2 years in the mountains or something.
Exactly. I think that there would be something fun to that, and
it's kind of how Scientologists work, right?
I think so, although I don't know exactly how they work, and I'm not rich enough to find out. But the thing is, like, you could still enjoy the fruits of the labor of a light bulb or something, but no one's going to tell you how it works until you follow the initiation rituals. That'd be kind of fun.
That would be fun.
Well, if we get a chance to restructure society, let's consider that as an option.
All right, we'll do this right after the Jutlarian Jihad, or Jutlarian Jihad, Butlarian Jihad. Jesus, what did I just do?
Well, that's a good one.
That was so crazy. How did my tongue do that? Okay.
Yeah. Transposed. You spoke dyslexically. It happens to me all the time.
Does it?
I think so.
Okay.
Yeah, I think dyslexically sometimes. So
cool.
All right. I mean, it's less cool than it sounds.
Well, yeah, good point.
So I like his answer here that the solution, the consistent solution, which maintains the possibility of fun, is to stop worrying about what other people know.
Hell yeah.
So I do agree with that. Like, if I could go online and Google, in fact, like this is true for games that I've beaten a lot, like especially like Elden Ring or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
If I do find a secret, like I don't care if it's on a wiki somewhere. Like I found it. How cool is that?
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's legit to be fine with that, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But to your point, the next bullet point, I think, harkens back to what we're saying about Newton as well.
The joy of assisting your civilization by telling it something it doesn't already know does tend to be one shot per discovery per civilization.
Yeah. No one else gets credit for calculus or explaining the orbit of planets.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, I do think fun is very important. I think doing important, meaningful things is also important and is different from fun. So, optimizing for two different things here, and I'm not sure if we should need to talk about them in the same paragraph. Like, some people are trying to discover new important things, and some people are trying to have fun, and those don't necessarily overlap.
No, but like the joy of figuring something out is kind of the thing that meets in the middle there in that Venn diagram, right?
Yeah, I think fun is generally always training, and when there's no opportunity for good fun training, you'll never get to the point where you want to discover all new important things. And so it is bad if we strip all the fun out of learning from the very beginning, because then you're not going to get new people who love learning. And
I think you're onto something about fun being largely about training.
Mm-hmm.
Certainly a lot of play seems to be about training.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, I like this last one, that if you don't know, it's a mystery. Or rather, if you don't know, it's a mystery. And now think of the many things you don't know. Isn't the world suddenly a much more mysterious and magical and interesting place? As if you'd been transported to an alternate dimension and had to learn all the rules from scratch.
Right? You don't need
Why does that sound like such a great fiction premise?
I know. But yeah, and that's his point. You don't need to be isekai'd into a different game world. You already don't know almost everything about this one.
And that's something I try to remind myself of once in a while, where, and I think at some point in this sequence, actually probably be the ones about like how a lot of our mundane abilities are pure magic if you tried to explain them to somebody without them.
Mm-hmm.
Like the fact that you and I are communicating our thoughts together using acoustic vibrations.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, we're even doing it over, the magical medium of the internet, right?
Yeah.
But like just because basically everyone can talk makes it seem like it's less magic, and it's less unique, but it's still really freaking cool.
Mm-hmm.
And it'd be a superpower if it wasn't super common.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, anything else on this one?
You were reminding me of that post that he had a while ago where he mentions all the things we do that are super common, but like if you look at it for the first time, is freaking superpowers.
Oh, okay, so that one was before. I thought it might have been coming up. I knew it was going to be around this because it ties so well to this kind of point here.
Yeah, I think. Maybe it's coming. I think it was before though.
I think you're right. Who knows?
We've gone through several hundred at this point. It's hard to remember which ones we've already done and which ones we read in the distant past.
Exactly. The distant past for me is anything more than like 3 weeks ago. So
right. All right. On to bind yourself to reality.
Sounds good.
All right. That's the next LessWrong post, and he is trying to make the point. Well, what is this first bullet point here? Hold on.
He's explaining why he's taking the time to explain why, like, reducing things can be fun, or like doesn't suck the fun out of the world. Because he's like, I do plan to take certain things apart, and I don't want to, suck all the fun out of your lives. So I'm explaining why this won't suck the fun out of it.
Oh yeah. Good intermediate step here. I'm glad, because otherwise, you don't necessarily want to do things that are going to suck all the fun out of your life. And he's saying like, no, this isn't going to suck the fun out of your life, dude. Chill out.
Yeah. This is not really related to the post, but there's a line here. But even more deeply, it's one of those subtle, hidden core rationality things. The sort of thing where I start talking about the way. It's about binding yourself to reality. There's a link in there to yudkowsky.net/virtues, and that link isn't alive anymore. I think the whole website might be down.
Oh, that's interesting. No, yudkowsky.net is up. Yeah. Oh, he moved it. If you go to yudkowsky.net and then click on rationality, scroll down a little bit, and there's 12 virtues of rationality.
Oh, rational/virtues rather than just /virtues.
Yes.
Well, he didn't update the LessWrong post that was 15 years old, so come on.
He's worse than Newton.
But at least it takes you to a 404 on the same website. It doesn't just take you to a blank, could not be found page. So
yeah, so you can find it again if you click around a bit.
Oh, good. Well, that changes that sad face that I put in the comments to a I'll just delete the sad face. Boom. Great. It's still there.
Yeah. But yes, so you can find the 12 virtues of rationality if you'd like.
Yeah.
In this post, he's saying that to get close to the truth, you really got to be willing to press yourself up against reality as tightly as possible without flinching away or sneering down. And you can see this bind yourself to reality theme, because like I still wasn't quite getting what he was getting at. He says, as an example, you can see this theme in the old post, Lotteries, A Waste of Hope, where understanding that lottery tickets have negative expected utility does not mean you give up the hope of being rich. It means you stop wasting that hope on lottery tickets.
Yeah, I like that. And I mean, the thing is like, you're not going to be able to, you'll have a much harder time discovering something original and enjoying that fun if you're lying to yourself or just not engaging properly with the world around you.
Yeah.
So, I'm trying to think of, I like the shape of the kind of problem might be like if you're trying to solve a societal problem. If you refuse to engage with certain possibilities about the cause of it, or are just lying to yourself about it or whatever, you'll be unlikely to find the solution.
Yeah, well, I mean, not only that, I think this post is talking a lot about like the emotional aspects of things, because like he said at the beginning, he's trying to point out this isn't going to ruin your life. Like going back to the whole unweaving the rainbow thing that Keats was like, oh, now rainbows are just lame or whatever. The quote I pulled out of here that I think is most pertinent to this is that Elias just says, so instead of destroying emotional energies associated with bad explanations, let us redirect these emotional energies into reality. Want to fly? Don't give up on flight. Give up on flying potions and build yourself an airplane. So,
perfect.
Yeah, he's not destroying the emotion of the rainbow. He's redirecting it to, the wonder of how light works and how it can be bent and refracted and turned into all these crazy things that we then detect with our eyeballs, these little squishy meat things in our heads. And that's a very different type of wonder, but it doesn't mean you destroyed any sort of emotional wonder. You just redirected it from dumb magic stuff into like really weird, complex physics stuff.
Yeah. No, that's a good way to put it. And he puts it succinctly as well, saying it's not dreams I object to, only impossible dreams.
Yes. So this post, I thought, touched on a little bit of this core conflict that we seem to get a lot in rationality / post-rationality. I'm just going to quote this. He says, the Hollywood rationality stereotype is that rational equals emotionless. The more reasonable you are, the more of your emotions reason inevitably destroys. When you have arrived at your best picture of the truth, there is nothing... Oh, then he objects that when you have arrived at your best picture of the truth, there is nothing irrational about the emotions you feel as a result of that. The emotions cannot be destroyed by truth, so they must not be irrational.
Yeah, I think like, especially like I said, in some of the post-rat circles that say that seems to still think that rationality advocates straw volcanism just haven't actually engaged the rationalists or rationality that much, which is fair. You know, I'm not going to tell people they're doing stuff wrong, but
Yeah.
I will tell people that they're wrong if they're shitting on something. You know, if they're shitting on something in a way that isn't even accurate to what it's saying.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, that part I do draw contention with.
I agree. I think he
There's plenty of legit reasons to disagree with rationalists, but to say, oh, because they're a bunch of emotionless robots who want us all to be Spock, that's just lying.
Yeah, he said.
And I'm not saying anyone's actually saying that I've met, but just hypothetically.
So I do want to talk about this just a bit. In the post, he quotes this previous line of his that says, "When physics seems counterintuitive, you've got to accept that it's not physics that's weird; it's you." That's, I don't know, many dozens of posts back, but he says like this same thing applies to emotions. You just swap out emotions for physics here, and that's what I'm talking about right now. So I did that, and then the line turns into, when emotions seem counterintuitive, you've got to accept that it's not emotions that are weird, it's you. Which is very much a sort of thing that you would hear from the embodied emotion post-strat people kind of say, that like the emotions are just there, they're telling you something, you got to accept them, and if you have problems with them, that's a you problem, not a emotions problem. So like he's been talking this whole post-rat thing from the very beginning, and I think the people, the so-called post-rats who haven't read in the sequences don't know any of this stuff intimately. They don't know that, but also it's hard to fault them entirely, because even though Eliezer does know this and does talk about it sometimes, nonetheless, like the vibes he gives out, the whole aesthetic, at least initially, is very much of a, we need to lean more into the Spocky reasonableness stuff, and only later does the whole, I mean, he barely touches on the emotions thing at all, because I think to him it just wasn't a big deal. Like, he already knew how to do all this emotional processing and embodiment, and so he didn't need to write about it. And I think maybe he didn't realize that a lot of his readers are nowhere near where he is in that developmental stage. And since he concentrated on the other parts, like a lot of the rationalists that read him did, in fact, have a big disconnect with their emotions. And so I don't think the post-rats are necessarily wrong in feel. They're wrong on the ground level facts, but Eliezer didn't write about emotions very much at all, and now they're kind of picking up that slack just because he didn't feel he needed to, and it turns out that someone did need to, and it's a good thing that there's some people around doing it. Does any of this sound reasonable to you?
No, totally. I mean, I think all of us, at least, I mean, maybe I'm definitely typical minding. I will say, I am sure that many of us, because I've spoken with many of us, have gone through a phase where it's like, no, I should tune my emotions down. You know, I should feel less, and that's not the way to live. Yeah. And that is like, it's not ignored in Yudkowsky's OG sequences, but it's not belabored that much. And so maybe so I think what they're picking up on, like the post-rats who would say that, you know, rationalists are emotionless, they're picking up on like what people are actually doing, not what, like, you know, whatever our holy book says to do. Right.
Yeah.
So no, I can follow that completely. It's one of those things, like facing like a sad truth or whatever, or an uncomfortable truth is difficult, and it shouldn't be, or like it, I don't want to say it shouldn't be painless, because it really shouldn't be. Like, you know, you can acknowledge something, be like, yep, well, that sucks, and that's the end of that. And it can be, but it's fully human and fully appropriate to let your feelings go to a sad place and stay there for a minute and feel that, right?
Yeah. Well, I guess I'm just going to take this moment to really quickly remind everyone that if you want to go hang out with a whole bunch of rationalists and post-rats, there's Vibe Camp 3 coming up, and that is where a ton of post-rats go to, I don't know, try to do rationalist stuff and also do emotion stuff and mix it all together. And it's a weird, crazy place. So, as we said earlier in the episode, check it out, maybe come visit.
Well, anything else on this post then?
I think that's all of it.
Great. I like these. I remember both of these, I think, pretty well from my first time because they're I don't know. I think I like some of the more like emotional and like personal ones more. Not necessarily like, those aren't exclusively my favorites, but they often are. I also really love like, the Bleg and Rube example. Like there's nothing like that I can relate to on an emotional level with those things other than like, oh yeah, of course. Getting the difference between whatever, how our words map to things and how things map to our words, right?
Mm-hmm.
I remember all those too, but these ones are a lot of fun.
Yeah.
But let's look what's coming up for next time. We've got if you demand magic, magic won't help. That sounds fun.
It does.
And the beauty of settled science.
I always like beauty.
Yeah, me too. And settled science is a fun term because sometimes things are less settled than they seem. So
that's true.
All right. Well, we'll have to find out in a couple weeks.
Right.